Abyssos probably just dropped when this is coming out, but I want to take a look back at the previous tier of Acidelos to shine a light on the animations of the different raids. Cannot stress enough that this is not a raid guide. I just like to shine light onto animations and battle mechanics that sometimes are too subtle or small to notice during the heat of battle. I don't want to waste your time, so let's jump into the third circle of the Acidelos tier. This fight is against the Phoinix, a bird-like creation that blocks your path to the fourth circle. Interestingly enough, this is actually a Phoinix that was one of the failed creations on the way to the true Phoinix. This one is filled with fury and wrath and wants to see the world burn, which it did actually, because in my opinion, P3S in Party Finder is probably the hardest fight of the tier. According to Eric Thonius, this is Acidelos' most unruly creation. In the cutscene leading up to this fight, it's really cool to see the pathway from the waterways of the second circle. I like seeing that continuity through the tier, and speaking of continuity actually, it seems like Abyssos can be reached from the fourth circle of Acidelos. So we're actively going to the gates to open up Abyssos. Everyone probably knew that, I just thought it was a cool detail. While traveling through the corridors, Hesperos appears and wraps the world around us, transforming the area around us into a fiery hellhole. This arena is orange. Like really orange. So orange in fact that some players made a mod to desaturate the fights so they could actually see the attacks. There's not too much to point out about this arena. It's a scorched wasteland that is dry and perfect to suck all the moisture out of your soul to prog. The bird itself is a three-headed beast with deep red feathers adorning its multiple wings. It also has these antler-like things coming out of its back. Anyways, I think that's enough lore and discussion. Let's look at some of these attack animations. The auto attack in this raid is pretty simple. It's just a claw swipe. The tank buster is usually a stronger version of the auto attack, but in this fight, the buster Heat of Condemnation actually targets the two tanks with fireballs. The two heads on the outside are what shoot these fireballs into the air at the end of the cast. Slowing down the footage, you can actually see that there is a solid object that comes raining down. Experimental Fire Plume is the next attack and has two variations. The outside of the arena or the inside is targeted depending on the fireballs that the Phoinix casts. This looks like a ring of fireballs or a singular giant fireball. The Ring of Fire targets the outside area with double casts of fire before hitting the middle. The single fireball is just an incredibly large AoE in the middle. In the Savage version, this actually targets a random character, so you have to bait it in the middle to avoid damage. The explosion from these AoE fireballs looks pretty impressive, with the initial hit fanning out flames in all directions. These fireballs are also completely fire instead of having a solid core like the Tank Buster. I'll take a second here to touch on the Char Plume and Glory Plume mechanics. Char Plume is the name of one of the two mechanics that can show up in Glory Plume, so I'll just cover that Glory Plume, which is a Savage only mechanic. Phoinix will send dark fireballs out in the fight that either mean a light party stack mechanic or a spread out mechanic. These have the same effects as the normal fire attacks, just with a red and black recolor to the textures. Scorched Exaltation is the raid wide attack and simply has the Phoinix lifting its head and wings as fire spreads out. It seems to be the same dark fire we just saw, judging from the red and black colors. Darkened Fire summons fireballs that need to be hit with the fireballs that the Phoinix shoots at players. There's a common theme of just fire and more fire and more fire. It's great, I love it. It doesn't hurt my eyes. I'm fine. These fireballs have a solid core in the center, though are kind of a light attack in regards to their effect. In the normal version, these will be dropped at a specific spot, though Savage will drop on random players. The Darkened Fire casts Darkened Blaze, which deals damage to all players if it goes off. This actually appears in the Phoinix fight seen in the final coil of Bahamut turn 3, and has the same kind of resolution. There's a number of times where the Phoinix in Pandemonium uses attacks that we see from the Primal fight in the Bahamut raids actually. I'll try to point them out as I get to the similar attacks. Trial of Condemnation is a diving attack that has two variations, much like most of the attacks in this fight. If the birds on the outsides have fire coming out of its open beak, then the sides will be hit as the Phoinix flies forward. If just the middle head is spewing fire, then it will just hit the middle lane. Thought that was a pretty neat tell. I always like when a boss has cues that give you information about the upcoming attack. In the Savage version, you will also have to spread or stack with a partner depending on if you are on the center or outsides. Man, I think I'm realizing why I hate this fight now. There are so many attacks that have multiple variations and stack or spread mechanics. There's so much variation that it's hard to communicate and do that, especially in Party Finder. Anyways, moving on. In both versions, there is an adds mechanic where the Phoinix summons sunbirds. While these adds are out, the Phoinix glows a brilliant orange in the center, casting Blazing Rain, which rains droplets of fire down upon the arena, dealing continuous damage throughout the phase. You'll probably notice that the Savage versions have a different color and are smaller when they are initially summoned, transforming into the bigger variations after they are revived. Both these models are the same as the Binus, probably didn't pronounce that right, in the Phoinix fight from the final coil of Bahamut raid. The Bahamut raid even has an add phase similar to the Pandemonium raid, where the Phoinix shoots out damage while you keep the birds apart. In the normal version, these birds can do a rear or forward carve, which is an attack in front or behind them. They use their tail to slice out with a blue strike effect. Also in the normal version, a Phoinix fire gauge will build, which will also make the dead rebirth wipe the party. In Savage, the birds will start casting Whirlwind if they are not killed fast enough, wiping the party. Darkened Fire is what surrounds the downed birds and transforms them before they start casting Fire Glide Sweep. This has the Sunbirds during these drilling strikes towards the tethered players. When these are downed a second time, the Phoinix wraps them in Darkened Flames again, but then they turn into these squid eyeball things called Spark-Fledged. These join the Phoinix and glow the same brilliant orange before the bird wraps its wings and starts charging up for dead rebirth. Knowing that the Phoinix has an eye in its center and covering itself up looks really similar to the squid things, right? Like the wings kind of cover around them and the eye in the center is pretty much the same thing. I thought that was a really interesting similarity. So we're kind of seeing like how this Phoinix actually was birthed maybe? And that's maybe like a huge stretch, but just wanted to point that out. At the end of the cast, the Phoinix spins before unleashing an incredibly strong attack. Red lightning can be seen arcing out and rocks fly up from the power of the attack. The Bahamut raid has Rebirth, which changes up the nature of the fight similarly to the Pandemonium raid, though the Phoinix only changes color in the phase change rather than getting these little eyeball baby things. Speaking of these eyeballs, they target the person with the second highest enmity. Each spawns an orb above their head that disperses into a number of smaller orbs that all fly out and home in on their target. Next is a Cinderwing attacks, which can target the left or right side of the Phoinix. You can actually see giant feathers and flames fly down on the targeted side. Fledgling Flight is an attack where the Spark-Fledged are placed around the arena to shoot Ashen Eye, which is a conal attack that shows an incredibly fast slice of darkened fire. At least I assume so, since the smoke that's kicked up behind it is red and black. The smoke also may be darkened fire that rises up behind the slice attack. It's kind of hard to tell with the effects. This happens a little differently in the Savage version, with the eyes targeting different characters and all resolving at the same time. These eye attacks in Savage also go along with the mechanic Death's Toll, which adds different stacks which need lethal damage to get rid of. Life's Agonies is cast right after this and seems like a light attack similar to what cleansed the Darkened Fire in the beginning. It's kind of like the Phoinix is giving us that Darkened Flame and then cleansing us out of existence. Maybe a stretch, but it was the first thing my mind went to seeing this attack's effects. It's like fights where you get a zombie debuff that kills you when you get healed from the boss, which fits with a bird whose theme is reviving. You can also see some feather effects during this burst as well. There are a set of mechanics that are the bane of every party finder's P3S grind, but before that, let's look at the last share mechanics from the normal and Savage versions. These are Devouring Brand and Searing Breeze. Devouring Brand triggers flames to move towards the center with the flames increasing in size and cutting off the arena into 4 small quadrants. Searing Breeze is simply large AoEs that target players, which explode in a plume of fire and smoke. Okay, now let's look at the unique Savage mechanics. Fountain of Fire is the first attack we'll look at, and has a number of different mechanics also happening during that. We'll look at the puddles that are dropped during this, Sun's Pinion. These summon pink glowing birds that appear with an explosion of fire. These tether to use similar to the Adds phase, and do a dashing attack that leaves behind an afterburn of Darkened Fire. While this is happening, fire pools appear on the edges of the arena tethering to the Phoinix. If these aren't picked up, the Phoinix will get a buff that will wipe the party with the coming raid wide. Players who take the tether get some insane buffs to do both healing and damage. I love seeing just the insanity with the size of the shields you can get here. It's incredible. There's a similar mechanic in the Bahamut raid where birds tether and dive to its player, while a Fountain of Fire needs to be soaked by a player so as not to buff the Phoinix. Next up is Firestorms of Acidelos. A giant wave of flame bursts out from the Phoinix and he again glows like he does in the Add phase. 3 tornadoes are spawned that shoot out cones of fire at the closest person. The Phoinix also shoots out conal flames at 3 of the closest players as the Tankbuster attack tethers resolve as well. This is actual insanity, and the Elmo on Fire GIF perfectly encapsulates this entire section because Jesus Christ, it's insane. Flames of Acidelos also happens for all of these conal flames, which in and of itself are just another set of conal flames before the rest of the flames. And there's fire, and there's orange, and there's burning, and there's people crying in the corner, and there's people dying. Okay, sorry. Starting to panic again. The final mechanic is Darkblade's Twister. I'm at limit, dude. There's so much fire. All 3 of the tornadoes tether to the bird, with the Darkened Fire tether creating a knockback and the fire tethers creating donut areas around them. These animations are all just fire that burn your retinas as you try to parse what is coming out from where, and why your group is slowly burning to a crisp, and why Party Finder is burning out because there are a billion different strats of this section with Mita and Elmo and a bunch of other names, and no one actually knows what they're doing half the time, and it's just all burning to the ground. And then you finish, and the bird has become fried chicken, and you're left there just wondering, is it worth it? Was it? And that is it for the third circle of Asphodelos. The visual design for this raid could have been a little better in my opinion, but mechanically I really like this fight when everyone knows what to do. I also thought it was really cool how this fight drew from the original Phoinix Primal raid. Seeing similarities between fights like that is always such a nice touch. Anyways, if you enjoyed this, be sure to subscribe and check out my other breakdowns of Final Fantasy XIV or Kingdom Hearts. If you want to see me raid, I have a static going through the second tier right now on Tuesdays, Thursdays, and Saturdays. So follow me on Twitch if you want to see me be actual straight garbage at this game. See you in the next video. Also, a huge thank you to the patrons who support me. If you want to support me, there's a link down below to my Patreon.